Prime Minister Justin Trudeau set himself a new personal record recently, not one he should go around bragging about. This is a record high disapproval rating. Abacus Data just released a new poll showing that 59% of Canadians have a negative impression of Trudeau, with only 25% still having a positive impression. Now, before I dive a little bit more into these numbers, I just want to quickly mention Wyatt Claypool, am running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. So if you live in Calgary Signal Hill, buy a membership. Hopefully, vote for me number one whenever the nomination date comes around, or just check which riding you live in if you're in the city of Calgary. I know a lot of people don't know which federal ridings they live in. Sorry for the shameless plug. I will get back to Justin Trudeau's approval numbers. I'd like to point out that Justin Trudeau, I've said this in other videos, his 25% approval rating maps basically exactly to the Liberals' 24% national polling numbers. And if you follow Abacus polling for a long time, you'll notice that basically for the past year and a half, the Liberals' polling numbers have almost matched exactly with Justin Trudeau's approval rating. They only ever differ by maybe 1 or 2 points. And it's because, unlike the Conservative Party, Justin Trudeau is basically the entire Liberal Party. If you do not like Justin Trudeau, there's no chance you're voting for the Liberals. There's no extra little neat policies the Liberals have, or maybe you like the philosophy of the Liberal Party, but not Trudeau, because the two things are like almost one-to-one the same. Whatever the Liberal Party does is exactly what Justin Trudeau wants. Whereas with Pierre Poilievre or even Jagmeet Singh in the NDP, there are wings to the party. There are MPs who are very independent, who have slightly different opinions, or they have greatly different opinions on different issues. That's an appeal for a party that allows it to overcome a leader who doesn't please everybody, and that's pretty much every leader. The problem with Trudeau is that they've banked on the old Trudeau mania from the 70s and from 2015 to keep carrying Trudeau into his fourth election cycle. And at this point, the polish is off, and nobody cares anymore about Justin Trudeau supposedly being a charismatic, fresh leader on the world stage. He's a very, in a certain sense, old politician in the way he actually acts. He's extremely venile, very lazy in how he does his work, and he also just barely seems to try. He's as lazy as like an 85-year-old man. Anyways, I just want to then compare him to Pierre Poilievre's polling numbers, because Abacus Data put out the net results for each one. That Pierre Poilievre right now has a net positive 6% approval rating. Not too bad considering all of the negative media attention that Pierre Poilievre gets for basically no reason other than the fact that the media backs Trudeau. But Trudeau has a negative 34% approval rating. And think about it here too. Like 25%, that number is probably not going to shoot back up. Trudeau's had some bad moments of approval in the last 8 years, but it was usually brief and it corrected. You don't have a 25 or sub 30% approval rating for 6 months and then Canadians decide to give you a second look. They've given Trudeau now third, fourth, and fifth looks, so it would be a bit odd for anyone to say, I'm going to give that guy another shot. That's why the only tactic the Liberals have these days is trying to compare with no actual policy to be able to show that they're similar on. They're just trying to compare Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump, assuming that somehow they can strike up the exact same voter turnout that Biden had to defeat Trump in 2020. I don't know. They're just assuming that if Poilievre's negatives are high enough, maybe Canadians rally around Trudeau. It's really not going to happen. And I think the fact that even the NDP's numbers are stagnating means that I think a lot of Canadians are actually kind of wise to the fact that it's left-wing policy that's not working. It's not the Liberal Party. It's the policy that the Liberals, the NDP, and frankly, even the Greens all share together. I want to dig into a little bit of what Poilievre's numbers have looked like over the past few months. This is Trudeau's, of course. But if I go down here, of Pierre Poilievre's impressions, and notice how at the very start of his leadership was very negative. The reason that happened was because as a new leader, very few Canadians actually know who you are. It's kind of almost like it's very unheard of in Canadian politics for an opposition leader to immediately have super high name recognition, because Canadian politics doesn't have the entertainment value of American politics. So new leaders have to prove themselves. This very much so was a problem with both Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, not even commenting on the fact that Aaron O'Toole was effectively a Liberal. Aaron O'Toole did a terrible job even making Canadians aware he was alive and a sentient human being. By election day, I guarantee only about 70% of voters even knew who Aaron O'Toole was, despite being the main opposition to Justin Trudeau in that election. He was boring, so Canadians did not show up for him. That's where every once in a while I do have people criticize the idea that Pierre Poilievre's too negative. He's sometimes too bombastic, or he's too critical all the time. It's like he needs to do that to, one, prove he's not like Aaron O'Toole and just agrees with Trudeau on everything, and two, by actually being negative, by being bombastic, by being very critical, you get a lot more attention. And as a opposition leader, your name recognition matters so much. But you'll notice in this poll too that his actual approval ratings numbers are very low, like approval and disapproval rating numbers, when you combine them, are very low. And that even proves, even at this point in 2024, a lot of Canadians still don't know who Poilievre is. You'll notice that when you add up Trudeau's numbers, it's almost to 100%, with them taking off the undecided people away from this poll. The amount of undecideds in this poll with Poilievre is extremely high. And that's where, like, that's pretty impressive that he actually has good, like, positive approval, despite the fact that the vast majority of Canadians just hear that he's like an evil extremist conspiracy theorist. And it proves also that a lot of Canadians are actually looking into what the media says and fact checking it themselves, and realizing that it's a bunch of nonsense every time they go after Poilievre for somehow being extreme or too right wing or something like that for the Canadian public. And anyways, I wanted to get down to here, and this was also I think an interesting result that we had. This is the desire for change poll results, not in any nice bar graph. I like when things are in nice bar graphs, but this is different demographics, different regions' desire for change. So British Columbia, 62%, Alberta, 63%, Ontarians, 55%, Atlantic Canadians, 47%, Quebecers, 33%. Really shows that that is where the Liberal Party's main strength is still. It's in Quebec, and I guarantee a lot of Bloc people are saying they don't want change, because even though the Bloc can never form government, they like the fact that at least they're in a position where they can influence policy here and there, since Trudeau's in a minority. That's all that, like, when that's a highlight for Trudeau, that Quebec doesn't want him gone yet, not a good sign, especially because Quebec tends to want a lot of the things that the rest of the country does not want. So when you're very well liked by Quebec as a whole, usually that means you're probably doing some things wrong when it comes to Western Canada and the rest of Eastern Canada. Anyways, moving on. Then you also have those who voted Liberal in 2021, 23%. Yes, not very high, but imagine the fact that these people literally gave you their vote in 2021, and now a quarter of them want you out. That is a little bit of a red flag for your party, when a quarter of your people not just might not vote for you, they're just unenthused, actively want your government changed. They're probably not voting NDP, I can guarantee, because all of these voters probably very much understand that the NDP would not actually, like, voting NDP would not result in a change. Either you get the same sort of minority government, or you would just have the Conservatives win anyways from vote splitting the Liberals. And then after that, you have those who voted for the Conservative in 2021, 82%. Millennials, 54%. Gen Z, 50%. Seniors, 52%. Those living in the GTA Metro Toronto area, 52%. Those living in Metro Vancouver, 60%. Those are scary numbers. That is the area that Justin Trudeau relies on the votes, in order to actually be able to win any election. He needs a lot of votes around the GTA and Vancouver areas in order to make sure that his Atlantic Canadian vote and Quebec vote can actually result in a government forming. He will always do well in a lot of the Atlantic provinces and the Montreal area, but when he's starting to lose votes around the GTA outside of the Toronto downtown core, that is his margin of victory for an actual government. Now, here's another thing I think is quite interesting. And you can see the re-elect a Liberal government has slumped. This is which of the following comes closest to your view. These are all voters. And remember, 24% of people, and this is where I think people, even in the Abacus national poll, are lying a bit to themselves. This one that shows that the Conservatives are up 17 points. I think the Liberals could actually come in much lower than 24%, because look at this. There's 16% of people who want to re-elect a Liberal government. 31% say it's time for change, but there's a good alternative. I think that's usually, you can basically put a lot of the NDP, Greens, voters and some of the Liberals into that category, that they don't like the Liberals anymore, but they are going to vote Liberal because they don't like Poilievre, because they believe some lie of the media that Poilievre is extreme. Sorry, I'll make this a little bit bigger on screen. So yeah, you have the 16 down there, the 31 who don't want change but don't know what kind of change, and then you have 53 who time for change and there are good alternatives. That is basically going to be, the conservative voters, some of the PPC people saying Bernier is a great alternative, even though I'm sorry, Bernier cannot win, and it's kind of Bernier's fault because he has never actually figured out how to appeal to a local riding's population. Being on Twitter all day does not help. But 53% is more than enough that the conservatives can work with in order to form a majority. As you've probably heard in the past, doesn't usually happen with the Liberals because they can win governments without needing this many votes, although it does help when they're trying to form a majority. The magic number, especially for conservatives, is getting at least 40% of the popular vote. So what Poilievre needs to do is effectively win 4/5 of the people who think that we need a change and that there's a good alternative. I guarantee a lot of the people who think there's no good alternative can be swayed over time, but Poilievre just needs to run the table on those who want a change to actually occur. It's not impossible at all because a lot of the people who are saying they want Liberals reelected or saying that there's no good alternative, they've already self-selected themselves out of ever voting Conservative. And the people who think there is a good alternative are usually not going to be the NDP, who know that their party is never going to form a government itself. And so this is currently the best possible thing they have going. They're the type of people who will say it's good for a change, even though it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome with the NDP. The NDP has no ability to actually get anything better than what they have right now, but their own voters will say it's time for a change and there's good alternatives, even though them voting for the NDP, the best possible result they could get is what's currently occurring now, with Justin Trudeau running the government, and every once in a while Jagmeet Singh whines at him and maybe adds a couple $1 billion to a bloated government program. That's all they can get. But with 53% wanting a change and having a good alternative party, I don't see how the Liberals come back, especially when they're still fighting with their own base on whether or not this government should stay in power. When they've lost 23% of their own voters from 21, and now only 16% of people, which proves that even that 23% of Liberals who want change is probably a bit low. When only 16% of Canadians overall want a re-elected Liberal government, that is basically like sticking a pin in it. Justin Trudeau's gone. There's no way of re-electing this man. He is going to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in each riding just convincing his old voters to show up. And those are probably not going to be effective, very excited voters. They're reluctant. And when you have a reluctant base, you cannot win an election. Just look at Aaron O'Toole. Just look at Andrew Scheer. They had reluctant bases of voters because they really weren't running on super, super solid conservative policies. So, and a lot of people just stayed home, or some people kind of volunteered, kind of donated. And when that's your attitude going into election, there's no chance you're actually going to pull off an upset victory. Show me the apathetic campaign in this world that's ever actually won a re-election effort, other than when their opposition is completely also unstrung. They don't know what to do. Apathy kills electoral chances. And I guess I'll leave you guys with that. Other than that, I have my usual Give, Send, Go linked in the description of this video below. I am being sued by a billionaire, myself, the National Telegraph. We are winning that lawsuit, but the man's dragging it out. He has no evidence. He basically filed no evidence against us that we defamed him. He even filed his evidence so late, he owed me $1,800 by a judge's order at one point. It's a clown show for him. So we're going to win this lawsuit, but giving any money to our legal fundraiser does help us bear the burden of the costs, especially because running this show, running for office, does make the $25,000 quite a bit of a drag on my finances overall. And then other than that, also I have linked in the description below my campaign website for Calgary Signal Hill. Again, a reminder, if you live in Calgary Signal Hill, please buy a membership, vote for me #1 on your ballot. And, I guess if you live in other ridings, also buy Conservative Party memberships. If a nomination comes up in your area, you'll want to make sure to be able to stop a red Tory from getting the nomination. There's a lot of conservatives out there, conservative people, quote unquote, who they're only running for the Conservatives because the Liberals have no chance in their area. That happens in a lot of safe Conservative ridings because it's easier for a Liberal to pretend to be a Conservative than it is for a Conservative to pretend to be a Liberal. Because to be a Liberal, you have to be like foaming at the mouth on social issues. You have to scorn big businesses. You have to basically just talk about social programs and all this stuff. It's a very odd mindset to get into to be a liberal, but to be conservative, it's a very logical mindset, which I think says something about conservatism, that you can just say, oh, I'm a socially liberal person, but I think we need to lower taxes and make government smaller. You get a lot of people, including in my nomination, who effectively are doing that. They run as very socially left-wing people, but they'll promise they'll cut taxes a little bit. It's like, if you're just going to be a low-tax version of Trudeau, Who cares? That's not exactly a dream scenario for me in a conservative government, that we can have a low tax version of what Trudeau is doing, or a lower tax version. A lot of these people aren't even that low tax. It's like Alison Redford's, who, when they get into government, they run on fiscal responsibility, but they still raise taxes and spending. Anyway, sorry. Now I'm rambling on, but I hope that you all enjoy my ramblings. That should be it for me today, and I hope you all have a great weekend.